rise above the noise and lead with purpose, growth, and truth. Today's episode is one that truly matters because it's about the way we speak to children, the tone we use, the actions we are modeling, and the lasting impact of our words and demeanor. Whether you're a parent, a teacher, a daycare provider, an aunt, uncle, neighbor, or friend, this episode is for you. Because every one of us interacts with children, and every one of us has the power to shape the next generation. We'll dive into the research behind how negative versus positive language affects a child's developing brain, their sense of self, and their emotional resilience. We're talking about gentle parenting, not as a trend, but as a science-backed, heart-centered approach that works. You walk away with key practical tips to guide children with more empathy, more kindness, and more intention. We'll even dive into what is discipline and how it can be done in a loving way without anger or leaving a negative impact. Lastly, I'll even give you some solid resources that will change your life, your family, and the way you look at our next generation. Because the way we speak and act towards children is how we are shaping who they will believe they are. Let's get into it. Welcome back to the High Road Podcast. This is your host, Maddie, and I want to invite you to this episode, and I'm so glad that you're tuning in. This is called The Tone of Tomorrow, Parenting with Compassion. So first off, I want to set aside this little note before I even dive into all of this amazing information that I have for you today that I'm really excited to talk about. The first thing that is first on my list to do is to note that this episode is not to condemn any individual. When I started the High Road Podcast, it was because I needed an outlet. And it was because I had learned all of these really, really hard things that truly made me who I am. And once I began to understand certain things and to do things a little bit better and to dive into resources and to get the help that I needed, I was able to actually change the way that I did things. And one of those things was parenting. And what I believed about parenting and the coping mechanisms that I had and how I spoke to my children and the things that I was saying and how I was turning anything negative and how I could rewire my brain for it to be more positive. And so today I want to be very clear that this episode is not to condemn anybody. If you have ever spoken down to a child, spoken down to any individual, or made someone feel bad, right? Because we have all been there. And I am here today to say that I have been there. I have been that parent that was a yeller and had no patience whatsoever. And I had to learn the hard way. I had to learn from my mistakes. In fact, I got so low as a parent that is when I actually truly started to feel not only horrible about myself, but I started to see negative things happening to my children. I started to see, when I was yelling, they started to cover their ears. And I was just like, whoa, what am I doing? That was the moment when I realized, yep, I'm not going to be this person. This is not going to be who I am. This is not how my children are going to see me. And that completely changed my life. I looked at that moment as, nope, I'm not going to be losing my cool. I'm not going to be this parent that is going to negatively affect my child and their life and how they see themselves and, how they view discipline. And I'm not going to affect their ability to regulate their own emotions and affect their ability in a negative way to, how they can communicate with other people and how they're going to feel internally about themselves. I decided in that moment that I was not going to be that person. And so that's when I dove into a bunch of resources and I found books and podcasts and anything that I could do that could just help me because I just didn't know. And so I am speaking to you today. If you just don't know, I want you to know that it is okay. It's okay, and we can change, and we can heal, and we can do things better, because when we know better, that's when we can do better. So let's dive right in. I know that we've all heard that little saying that says, don't cry over spilled milk. And I actually take this pretty literally in parenting, and actually considering this literally just happened this morning at my house. I had, given my children some cereal for breakfast, and it's like I would learn my lesson eventually. You would think that after they spilled things over and over and over again, that eventually I would be like, hey, let's, let's eat our cereal in the kitchen or on the table, and we do that a lot. But sometimes I try to be like that fun mom where I'm like, yeah, let's eat cereal, and watch a movie and whatever, let's just sit on the couch. And every single time it just kicks me in the butt. And so I kind of have to blame myself. But, using that saying as an example is really huge, considering exactly what happened was that my son, as he was, trying to get comfortable, he kicked with his leg or with his hand, whatever, and knocked the full cereal bowl, right out of my daughter's hands. And so it flies up in the air, falls down, and milk is absolutely everywhere. I decided in that moment, I took 2 seconds, what I was going to do. Well, I could have yelled. I could have been like, gosh darn it, why can't you just sit still? What is your problem? This happens every single time. I could have done that, or I could have just taken a breath. And that's what I did, because I learned the hard way. I took a breath. I said, all right, that's okay. Let's clean it up. The couch needs to be cleaned anyway. And so we did. And my son wasn't very happy because he had to clean it up, but he was the one that was responsible for the mess. Therefore, he needed to clean it up. So I helped him, I held the bowl while he picked it up with a spoon. And then we had to take all the blankets and he had to haul them upstairs, and I helped him. And then we needed to take the couch cushions off, and we needed to wipe down the couch. And again, he wasn't very happy about it. And he said, Mom, why do I need to do this? And it was, well, son, you made the mess. Now you need to clean it up. And so where I'm getting at today, and this is a huge, and it's just kind of funny that I knew that this was going to be my topic today, and then this is what happened. And these things happen every single day as a parent, right? Where our children do something to make a mess, or they do something that's like, oh my gosh, this is so frustrating. And we have to realize and take a moment, how are we going to talk to them? Because I knew in that split second, I could absolutely just break my son's soul, right? Like, that's a very aggressive way of saying it, but that is what happens. If I were to talk down to him over something so simple, and yes, it's frustrating, and I get that these things are frustrating that happen, whether it is our child makes a huge mess, or our child is not getting out the door, something is happening, we're late, we're stressed, and I'm going to get into why do we do these things as parents? Why do we do these things as adults? And then we're, acting out or saying things that we shouldn't towards children. And I'm not going to say that it's not like it doesn't make sense, because honestly, the things that are going on in our head when we're so stressed out, when these things are happening, it's like, yeah, shoot, this is so frustrating. I didn't want to clean my couch this morning. I didn't want to put in a whole new, thing of laundry, of blankets, wash my couch, all the things. But I knew that if I were to say something so negative to my son, like, gosh darn it, why do you always do this crap, right? That would hurt his feelings. When it wasn't that big of a deal. It just wasn't. And these things happen all the time. All the time. We're trying to rush to get out the door. We're yelling and screaming. And it's like, we just simply have to, we can't stay in this place where we're being like, gosh darn it, I'm just the worst parent in the world. And it does. You feel like that. I've had so many mornings where we are rushing to get out the door. It's like, I have to drop you guys off. Then I have to go to school. Like, I need to be to work on time. And I just finally decided, like, if our mornings are going to be so chaotic to the point to where I'm yelling, I'm screaming, I cannot blame them if their entire day sucks. I have to take that. Like, that's on my shoulders. It's so incredibly important to model to our children to be that, that calm presence, and to not blame them for things that they are not to be blamed for, right? We're the adults. The responsibility is on our plate. And that doesn't mean that we are going to be perfect. That doesn't mean that we're ever going to be like that. We're just not ever going to be frustrated. That is not the case. And I'm going to dive into that today. So that's really where I want to go with that's where I want to go today is we're not going to cry over spilled milk. We're not going to yell and scream and act like crazy people towards our children over things that we need to be regulated and we need to be able to handle, and we don't need to break their souls because of the things that happen in this life, because it's not their fault, right? And it also is one of those things where if we do this over and over again, actually, if we're speaking negatively, if we're behaving negatively towards children, that actually is going to alter their brain chemistry. And so that's what we're going to dive into. We're actually going to talk about that. What happens when we talk down to our children? What is actually happening to their brain? Well, I did some research, and studies actually using techniques like the diffusion tensor imaging, or they call it a DTI, have actually shown that verbal abuse or, talking down to children, belittling them, things like that, actually alter the structure and the function of their brain pathways. So this is involved, in the language processing and emotional regulation, the things that they absolutely need. When we're talking down to our kids, we're altering. When we're negatively, responding to them and behaving towards them in really negative ways, it actually is altering their brain, right? And that's where trauma comes in. That's where it actually can affect their language processing. That's where it actually affects their emotional regulation. So an example of this is when we tell kids, and I'm going to use this example later on today and probably many times throughout this podcast, stop crying. Think of that. How many times do we tell kids stop crying? And I've said that before. And then it was like, once I understood the power behind that, I never said it again. Stop crying. I look back and I think of this one video that I watched one time that just absolutely altered my brain chemistry. When we tell kids to stop crying, is that verbal abuse? No, it's not. But let's dive into what that actually means, okay? Let's think of, as adults, when someone tells us, like when I'm, all worked up, when I'm sad, when I'm frustrated, when I'm angry, and someone tells me to stop crying, I promise you that is a moment where I feel so unsafe. Like when I am feeling like that, I know that I need a hug. Maybe I need some space. Maybe I need to talk to someone. But if someone comes up and tells me to stop crying, not only does it make me feel like my feelings are not justified, it makes me feel then like, okay, something's going on in my brain. Like what's wrong with me? Why am I behaving like this right now? Why are they questioning why I'm crying? There must be something wrong with me. And I want you to take that moment and think of what it feels like for us as adults. Now, if we think of our children telling us that, think of all the times that maybe you would have, became emotional or cried in front of your child. Have they ever told you to stop crying? No. Our children are naturally, they're going to naturally respond the way that people are supposed to respond, right? Until they're taught otherwise. They're going to come and rub our back, or they're going to look at us with concern and like, whoa, what's happening? Maybe they might hug you. Maybe they might ask if you're okay. But overall, they're really just going to be observing you. If they don't really know what to do, they're going to be observing you. But they're not going to tell you to stop crying, because that is not a response that they have. So why do we do it as adults? Why do we tell children to stop crying? And it doesn't matter what it is. It does not matter. Because when kids cry, it does not mean that they're just being big babies. It doesn't mean that they're always throwing tantrums. Yeah, sometimes they are throwing tantrums. But it means, the crying means that they are upset about something, that they're frustrated about something. And they have the right. When we're telling them to stop crying, we're telling them that they don't have the right, that their feelings aren't justified, that they don't have the right to cry. They don't have the right to feel the things that they need to feel. Then what does that teach them? Well, it teaches them to bottle things up. And that leads to a whole lot of things that we're going to talk about today. So it's really important that we're thinking about how we talk to kids. And I haven't even gotten to the rest of the research here. But one thing that I have to talk about is, I had seen a couple. We took the kids to the water park yesterday. And again, this is not to condemn anyone, because I have been this parent. I have been this stressed out parent. I have been a parent that does not know what to do when my child is throwing a tantrum, right? We have all been there. There was this particular couple, and I noticed that they had a newborn baby. So you can even imagine, probably no sleep. They're trying to do something fun. Their child is throwing a tantrum because they have to leave. That's frustrating. It's like, we just did this really nice thing for you, and you're deciding to throw a tantrum. I think that all the time with my children. And then I'm like, wait, they don't understand, they don't see it that way. Because they don't. Little kids don't. They don't see it that way, like, oh, I should be grateful for this. Until they actually learn and they understand the value of money, and they understand the value of time. And they understand how it actually, all the hard work that goes into adults going to work and, still waking up early and taking care of little kids and diving into all of the really hard things in life. And then on top of trying to do something fun for your kids, the kids don't see it like that. It's hard to ask them to be really, really grateful. Yes, it's something that we want them to learn. It is. But it's hard for them to understand that concept. So there were these parents who were really frustrated that their child was throwing a tantrum. And the kid was crying, and so the mom right away was, stop crying, stop crying. Let's think of it from this child's perspective. This child is at the water park. This child is having so much fun. And now he has to leave the water park. Please tell me why he wouldn't be upset. I get upset when fun things are ending, but I have the skills to be able to handle it. This child didn't. This child doesn't have the skills. Now, we have to also understand, the different ages of children, right? It's really hard for a 4 or 5-year-old age child to be able to understand when things end and how you just have to be able to handle that. Now, some can. My daughter does an awesome job, and she's only 3, and she does a great job of transitioning. My son, no matter how many warnings I give him, no matter how many, okay, hon, you only have 15 minutes. Okay, now you only have 5 minutes and we have to leave. No matter what, he gets so upset. He just has a hard time with transitions. But it's like, we're not understanding. We're not thinking about how these kids feel. Okay, this kid was at the water park. He's having the time of his life, and now he has to leave. Of course, he's going to cry. He's upset. He's upset. And now this family, and again, I'm trying not to look, right? I'm getting my kids into the car, and then I'm like, great, they're right next to us. They're parked right next to us. So then I'm like, not wanting to hear, not wanting to look, but it's kind of like a bad car accident. Like, you just can't look away. And it was hard for me to even look away because this mom was just kind of acting crazy. She was yelling, stop crying. You're not getting to the vehicle until you stop crying. What on earth do you think that stinking did to that child. The child is now crying more, right? Whereas if it would have been, and we're going to dive into this, how can you respond in a way that's gentle and kind and, patient with our children, instead of, giving them a hug and being like, hon, I know it's really, really hard to stop doing things when they're really, really fun. And I get that. But this is the way that it is, right? You still have to get into the car. And if you want to continue to cry, I understand. It's really upsetting. As parents, for whatever reason, sometimes we just lose our minds and we can't handle the crying and the yelling, right? It's a lot. It is a lot. I have been in the van, in my van with my kids, and they are both yelling and screaming. And it is holy buckets. That is when I have to breathe. That's when, it's loud. It's obnoxious. It is just holy smokes, this is a lot going on. But we have to be able to handle that. We have to be able to be regulated. So, kind of furthermore with this whole scenario, this child continued to cry. The mother continued to yell. And eventually she, yanked him out of the car. And then what's happening? He's yelling and screaming even more. While the parents are yelling and screaming and saying, stop crying. Right? Please make that make sense, because it doesn't. It does not make sense. So when we look at the research behind this, behind the stress response that negative words and negative actions can actually, have an impact on our children, it's actually going to trigger the amygdala. So this is the brain's fear center. So this is when these things are happening and, children are triggered and they're being screamed at, being yelled at, their parents or caregivers are responding to them in negative ways. It's actually going to release huge amounts of stress. It's going to release stress hormones, and it's going to really interrupt the normal brain function. So when children then are living like this for long periods of time, then what's going to happen? Then it becomes trauma, because then they're constantly releasing stress hormones into their body. And that's when your brain begins to rewire. So the long-term effects of these things is that it actually can then contribute to long-term anxiety, depression, and then other mental health issues or challenges. The really scary part is that when children are living in these environments, when these negative interactions are occurring in, on a consistent basis, that's when it actually really affects in a negative way the development of their language skills. And then also just their ability to learn and then to communicate effectively. Can you imagine if a child who was always communicated to, or even sometimes in a really negative way, how then that can then affect their communication towards other people? Do you understand how that can then rewire their brains and create obstacles within their brain that make it hard to learn? Because that's what happens. It affects them. It affects their brain negatively. Not only this, but then it also can create toxic stress. So from the toxic stress, then it's going to disrupt the development of their neural connections. So now all of a sudden, now children are not only having a hard time maybe learning or communicating with others, not only is it affecting their language, it also then can affect their attention and then their decision making. Maybe they could be more impulsive. Maybe it takes them longer to process information. So the good news about this is that our brains are built to be rewired. So if you grow up in a home, if children, if at this point you're like, wow, I've been this parent, the good news is you can change. You can do better. If you were a child who grew up in an environment like this, where it was negative, where it was stressful, maybe it was abusive, whether it was verbal or physical, any sort of negative interactions. The good news is that your brain can rewire. On this podcast, we talk all the time about healing and how you can rewire your brain, but it takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of work. And for some people, it could take months, it could take years, because we have to be able to then rewire the chemistry that's in our brain from these events happening. And so how can we, as parents, as caregivers, as people who work with children, who see children every day, how can we make a positive impact on them? How can we build up strong little people to be healthy adults, rather than breaking them down so far then they have to spend the rest of their lives fixing and healing? Let's do it the first time. So when it comes to these things, the emotional and the behavioral impacts on these children is not only that it creates anxiety and depression, but then what's going to happen then long term? Well, long term, then they can struggle with self-talk within themselves. Okay, how are they talking to? Well, everybody else, these people call me stupid. My parents call me a crybaby. So now that's what I think that I am. And what is that going to do to a child? Well, it's going to increase their anxiety. It's going to increase their, lack of self-love, the way that they see themselves, the way that they view who they are, their self-value, and how they, think that they're worthy or not. That's going to have a huge impact on them. Not only this, but when they're seeing, emotions of other people constantly dysregulated, and my mom gets really frustrated and then she calls me names, or my mom gets, she gets angry at me and she yells and screams. This is going to then hinder a child's ability to develop healthy coping mechanisms and manage their own emotions. Why? Because they're constantly in a stressful state when these things happen. And this is also what's being modeled to them. They're not seeing any sort of coping mechanisms. They're not seeing their parent sit back and just breathe and take a second and say kind things rather than mean things. So these things are being modeled to them, and also their brain chemistry is being altered because they're in a stressful state. They're in a stressful environment. So it really changes the way that our children are able to grow up, and honestly, it creates obstacles and challenges for them that they should never have come their way, that they never asked for. So we have to be able to show our children healthy coping mechanisms. I'll never understand how we can look at a child and say something like, stop crying, or, ask a child to calm down. Like, just think about that. How do we expect our children to do those things if we're not modeling? That's like asking me to build a house when I have absolutely no idea. I have no background information at all on construction, on how to create the foundation of a house. I don't know any of that. I don't know any of that stuff. I don't even know how to work tools. And we're going to ask kids who don't have the skills, who haven't had the skills modeled to them, who haven't been taught. We're going to ask them to calm down? That's outrageous to me. And it doesn't make any sense. So the things that we're modeling, the way that we're speaking to kids, is all teaching them how they're going to respond to the world, how they're going to talk, how they're going to behave. When we're in stressful, frustrating moments, it's so important then, because we have little eyes watching all the time, that we're modeling, okay, How am I going to handle this frustration? Well, I'm going to take, a breath while I'm frustrated. I'm going to go take a minute. I tell my kids all the time, you know what? I need 5 minutes. They know that I'm frustrated. They know that I am. And that's okay. But instead of sitting there yelling and screaming at them, and they have nothing to do with it. They have absolutely nothing to do with the thing that I'm stressed about. But I tell you what, if they decide to, spill the milk, it might just, I'm only human. It might just make me, right on edge. It might really just be like, that was my last straw. But I still have to model what it looks like to manage frustration, what it looks like to calm down, because then I can't ask my kids to calm down when they're upset if I'm not modeling it to them. How we speak to our children now, how we behave to our children now, is what they will do to us, is how they will treat other people. What we are showing them is oftentimes what they're observing is how they're going to see the world. And how can we see it any other way? So we have to speak towards children the way that we want to be spoken to. We have to act towards children the way that we want them to behave towards us. Because if I, right now, when my children are 3 and 4 years old, if I tell them to sit down and shut up, that's a very negative thing. If I'm telling that to them, if when they simply do something like make a mistake or have an accident, they spill something, if I'm speaking to them negatively in those moments, please tell me why on earth, when they are teenagers, why they would then not turn around on me and tell me the exact same thing, except 100 times worse. Please tell me why they would not then tell me to shut the F up. You stupid, right? Like, where it could go. And in that how can I even be mad at them? How can I even punish them? Because if that's what I modeled to them, that's how they view the world. That's how they see it. That's how they'll talk to other people. That's how they'll talk to me. We have to model the things that we want our children to say, the things that we want our children to do. Does that mean that they're going to always do those things? No. No, you best believe. Like, I am not a parent of teenagers. I am fully, I say that I'm fully prepared. I probably will not be able to be fully prepared. There's no way you can prepare for teenagers. There's just no way. I have friends that have teenagers, and it's just like, oh, God bless your hearts, right? I remember being a teenager. And, so I'm always thinking of okay, what's going to happen the first moment that they are really sassy to me, that they are rude? That's going to happen, right? They're kids. They're going to go through their own journey, and there's nothing that we can do to stop that. We can't control what they say. We can't control what they do to an extent. However, we can control our responses. We can control what we're going to model to them. If they say something totally out of pocket, you can be like, whoa, you've never seen that in our house. That's for sure. So wherever you're getting that from, and then you handle it however you think you need to and provide the appropriate discipline. But I remember, growing up and my parents were cool, calm, and collected. And they spoke to each other kindly, and they spoke to me kindly. And I won't say that I was never sassy, because I was. I was that normal teenager. But at the same time, there was nothing ever in me that would ever have been, I never would have wanted to be mean to my parents, because they didn't model that. They weren't mean to me. They were emotionally available. And that's what we have to be able to provide to our children. We have to understand that when we are a mirror to them, how we behave, the things that we say, is what they're going to act upon. So why do we do it? What is the point? Why do we do these things as parents, as adults? Why do we talk down to children to the point to where it can affect their self-esteem? Why do we do that? Why do we do these things if it can affect them long term? Well, truly, I am a teacher, and I'm a behavior teacher. And every parent that I've ever seen so far walk into my classroom, I know that they love their child. But as people, we only know what we know. And until we know better, we can do better. So I understand that because we're human, sometimes we just don't know better. Sometimes we're just facing too much stress. Sometimes there's just too much on our plate. Between money problems, you have children running around, children not behaving, too much. I know when during the summer when I'm not teaching, if I'm not having like a structured, I'm kind of like providing structure to myself, I get really crabby. And so like if my 2 children are running around the house and I'm not, taking care of myself and providing structure to me and them, it's gonna like stress me the heck out. There could be relationship strain, right? You're having problems with your partner, car problems. Car problems will be the death of me. I can't deal with car problems. It stresses me the heck out. Can you imagine having 2 kids in your car and like your car breaks down or something? That's hard. Laundry is piling up. I have laundry currently almost like halfway to my ceiling that I need to put away. I hate it, but it stresses me the heck out. And every time I look at it, it raises my blood pressure just a little bit. Not knowing what to do, not knowing what's coming up. I can tell you there's been so many times where I've had to, go through maybe some custody stuff or deal with some things with my children's father that are so stressful. And I don't know what's going to happen. And that's really hard to parent. There are so many things that this life is throwing at us that does not in any way, shape, or form invalidate our stress. It justifies it. We're not intentionally trying to be this way. We're not trying to snap at our kids. We're not trying to be negative. We're not trying to be mean. We're not trying to talk down to them. Maybe we're just lacking coping skills. Maybe we're just lacking self-care. Our cup isn't full, so therefore, you're not pouring into your children's cup. Maybe that's what's been modeled to us. Maybe that's how our parents treated us. And therefore now we're just repeating the cycle. Well, I'm talking to my kids and I'm behaving towards my kids the way, that I was talked to, the way that I was behaved towards. I was spanked. And, if I didn't listen, well, I got the belt. Research actually shows that those things don't work. They don't work long term. Because it not only makes the child feel unsafe, but it's actually rewiring their brain to feel like then, they can't talk about their feelings. They can't make connections. They are quickly starting to make connections between when you mess up. That means that people can be physical to you. Therefore, I can be physical to somebody else. And then it just really creates not only resentment, but then it creates a lot of, okay, well, I'm just going to do these things in secret. Those things don't work long term. And I'm not saying that I've never been that person that hasn't spanked my child. Oh my gosh, when I didn't know what else to do, I 100% have been there. But I'm telling you, they don't work. There's research behind it. There's research behind why physical consequences do not work in any way, shape, or form. They only work short term, but long term, doing the easy thing in the moment does not work. So as parents, as people who are going to be with children, work with children, we're going to do the hard thing, which is to focus on the long term. Focus on the long-term goal of creating healthy individuals, building up strong little people, and not building them down. We're going to do those things. Maybe we just have a lack of coping skills ourselves. When I look back and I think of the times when I lacked so many coping skills and I ran from just a lot of issues that I, was struggling with at the time. When I went to therapy and I was able to really talk about my feelings and someone listened to me, go to therapy. If you notice that you're angry, if you notice that you lack patience, there's something in your life that just isn't working out, isn't clicking, and you don't know what the heck is going on, go to therapy, talk about it. Release those things. If you believe in God, pray. Release those things. Meditate. Release those things. Your children don't deserve to receive the brunt of your frustration. That just isn't how it's supposed to go. We're not intentionally trying to be this way. I truly do believe that. I truly do believe, and I'm not saying that there aren't just some parents that are bad parents. 1,000% I'm not saying that. But I am saying that there are some parents that just don't know. So when we know better, we can do better. So how can we do better? How can we know better so then we can do better? Well, let's dive into these resources. What I want you to do is I want you to simply go to Amazon and I want you just to start looking for books. I want you to go to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, whatever the case is. I want you to start just looking for podcasts and listening to them. How to talk to your children. The brain chemistry behind children. Read those things. When I got to be the lowest of low as a parent, I dove into those resources. I didn't know what I was going to get into, but it changed my entire life. So I'm going to give you 3 books today. And actually, in one of my past podcasts, I talked about one of these books before. And I'm going to give you actually a link to these books. Now, there's no affiliation. I'm not receiving any money, nothing like that from, these links. I simply really believe in this stuff. I believe in these resources. So the first one is No Drama Discipline. The second one is from this same author, The Whole Brain Child. This was actually their first book. And then there's a third book that I want to give to you today as a resource, Raising Good Humans. Read those books. Dive in. What is the research behind, how we parent our children, how we talk, how we behave towards our children, how we discipline our children, and how can it affect them? And how do we do it appropriately? And how do we do it so they are growing up to be healthy individuals and we're not making a lasting, long, negative impact on them? How can we do our job as parents? How can we do our job as teachers, as daycare providers? Who your children see during the day, the people that they're around, the people that they're being watched by at daycare for 6, 7, 8 hours a day is so important. It is so important. No matter where you are, no matter if you are, a new parent, or if your parent or your child is in daycare currently, whatever the case is, I am a broke mom. I am. But I will be darned if my children, I'll be darned, sorry. I just had to, that was weird. If I ever put my children in a daycare that does not make them feel safe, if I ever put them in a daycare that makes them feel, bad about themselves, where people talk down to them, there's going to be things that we can't control everywhere in life. My children are going to go to school and they're going to hear cuss words. They're going to hear swear words. Someone is going to say something mean to them. There's nothing that I can do, right? That's just life. Those things are going to happen. But control what you can. Make sure that your children have good teachers. Make sure that your children have good daycare providers. Make sure that you know what's going on. I cannot emphasize that enough. Because who our children are seeing outside of us, outside of our homes, is so important. As an educator, as, someone who has just observed and seen different things, there are people who are supposed to be professional and they're not. There are people who are supposed to be kind and helpful and they're not in the positions that they're in. And that is not because I believe that they're trying to be that way. I have seen the most amazing, wonderful people. But some people just maybe need a different profession. So tune in and know what is going on in these environments. And, really make sure that you have people who are talking up and speaking positively and behaving positively towards your children if you can help it. My gosh, if you can help it. I truly, truly believe that. One thing I want to kind of dive back into really quick as I kind of veered off a little bit. That's just what I do oftentimes during these podcasts. But I want to talk about No Drama Discipline. And this is the book that I talked about before in one of my past podcasts. And it is absolutely amazing. It completely changed my life. Now, the biggest thing, of course, that it talks about is discipline. You guessed it. But it changed the way that I view discipline. And it talked a lot about how discipline can be loving, and actually it's a huge form of love, and it absolutely has nothing to do with anger. In life and just society has made us believe that discipline has to be like in the moment we're frustrated, we're torqued off, and now we're responding emotionally. No, that's actually the opposite of what it is. So an example of this, and this is what really, when I read this book, this is what really helped me, be able to get a handle on myself and be able to change the way that I parented my children. So one example is my son struggles with transitions, right? So I put a lot of monitoring on screen time and things like that. That's just kind of the teacher in me. But he'll get some tablet time. And then, I'll set a timer. He has a visual. I'll be like, bud, you got 5 minutes. Remember, you're going to handle it. And sometimes he does. And sometimes he just does so phenomenal. And then sometimes he just throws a big, gigantic fit. And his sister's 3, and she'll look at him like, bro, you're crazy. She handles it really well, and he just doesn't. And to this day, I just, sometimes I have to turn around and kind of just giggle, but he'll throw these huge tantrums. And I could simply tell him, and this is what the book talks about. Excuse me. This is what the book talks about. I could tell him, stop crying, you're being a big baby. Right? I could tell him that very negative thing. Sorry, I really needed a drink. But instead, what this book helped me, it helped me understand how to speak to him. I can say something like this. This is an example. I understand you're upset. It's really hard to be told no or, to stop something when we're having fun. But right now, it's time to eat dinner and your timer went off for your tablet. That's it, right? And I'm going to hug him and I'm going to just physical touch is another thing that this book talks about, and it's so huge. Because when our children are, throwing tantrums or crying or just emotional, they get because they're humans. We all get emotional. And when they don't have the skills to handle these hard things, then it's so important that not only are we talking to them appropriately, but then we're, with our actions towards them. So, I'll rub his back. And every now and then it gets to the point where, he continues to throw tantrums. So then that's when, if he continues and, I've kind of given him the resources that he needs, it's like, buddy, I understand that you're upset. I know that it's really hard, right? I know that you love your tablet time. However, right now it's time to eat dinner. Or right now it's time to go to bed. Right now it's time to, move on. You can't sit on the tablet all day. And that's just the way it is, right? Because I'm the parent. He doesn't just get to do whatever he wants. And I'm going to follow through with that. And I'm going to, rub his back and help him to kind of move on. Let's say he continues. So then that's when you can, put in some consequences. Well, I'm letting you know that if you continue, now you threw something because you decided to throw something. Well, now your tablet time is gone tomorrow or in the morning, or you don't get whatever the case is. You want to make sure that your consequence matches the action That's kind of another thing that this book really talks about. It's one of those things where it's like, don't be so like out of pocket as a parent and be like, oh, you did that, therefore you are not having a birthday. I can't tell you how many times I've heard that. Or like, that's it, all of your Christmas presents are gone. First off, that's really teaching a child that, okay, they didn't have the skills in the first place. And now you are giving them a huge consequence that you're not going to follow through with. So now that's teaching them that they can still behave any way that they want. You're going to say something that you don't mean, and then they're going to still get what they want. And then you're going to like create this huge irrational consequence when they didn't even really have maybe the skills in the first place, but they still need to learn, right? So my son, by having his tablet time taken away, by, having these consequences that match his actions, that's really helped him to kind of be like, oh, right, I don't get to act like this. My mom's not going to let me act like this, so therefore I need to really like reel this in here. So that is one thing that book really, really talks about that I firmly believe it's just completely changed who I am as a parent. We have to be able to regulate ourselves and to understand that discipline does not have to be this huge angry thing. We don't have to be frustrated. We don't have to be, and we're going to be frustrated, but we have to be able to handle it, right? As adults, we have to be able to handle it. So if we need to take a breath, if we need to take a minute, and if we need to give our little people a minute, there's so many times when my children are just totally, acting irrational as little people do. And I just simply say, you seem like you need some time and some space. Why don't you go ahead and, take some time, and I'll talk to you in 5 minutes, and I'm going to set a timer. It's huge. Get a timer today. Honestly, get a timer. That helps kids so much. Like, just be able to have a visual of maybe when they need to get it together, or like how long maybe they need to be able to change their behavior. It's so huge. So get them a visual timer. Like, I have one where it's different colors, and I'm often setting it, and I think it's a whole hour or whatever, and I'll just, sometimes I'm just giving my kids 5-10 minutes, and they look at the timer, and it helps them a lot, like, to be able to gauge not only, okay, how long am I behaving like this, and what does this time feel like, and, then when it goes off, it's like, all right, here we go. I need to zone in here. It's time. I need to talk to my mom now, or now I have a consequence, right? So get a timer today. That's another resource that I'm giving you. It's been life-changing. It really helps my kids. Now, the last kind of advice tip that I want to give you, and this is about how we're speaking to our children. In society, we're always using the words, you're naughty. Stop today saying you're naughty. Start using good choices and bad choices. Help children make the connection between you're not speaking down to them. Because once they actually are talked to like you're naughty, if they hear that over and over again, they actually could start to believe that. And then they could actually start to act like that. And so it's so important that we are teaching our children that when you make good choices, you have good consequences. When you make bad choices, you have bad consequences. And helping children make the connection between their consequences. Helping them understand those things. Because as parents, as people who are dealing with children and working with children, and that's all of us. Every single one of us has some sort of impact on a child. We see children all the time, everywhere. That is our next generation. And it's our jobs to be filling our own cups, so we're pouring into them, making sure that we're taking care of ourselves, making sure that we're being emotionally regulated, that we're going to therapy if we need, that we're getting the sleep that we need, we're taking care of ourselves. We're handling our stress and giving ourselves breaks and not, carrying guilt and shame, because for such a long time I did that. I just was in a cycle of shame, of guilt, of all of the things that I did that I should have done better as a parent. But forgive yourself. Forgive yourself today if you have ever been this person. Because I promise it is okay. And you can do better, because now you know better. And I know that you're listening to this podcast today simply because you are a person who cares. And you care about your children, and you care about the next generation. As parents, it's our job. As people who are with children on a daily basis, it's our job to be present, to be loving, and to be nurturing. So today I want to leave you with this truth. The way we speak to children becomes their inner voice. And the way we treat them becomes their view of the world. Our words matter, but so do our actions. The eye contact we give them when they're talking, the patience we choose in the moments that test us, the way we model kindness, forgiveness, and self-control. Children aren't just listening to what we say, they're watching how we live. Whether you're a parent, teacher, caregiver, or simply someone who crosses paths with children each day, your behavior teaches more than any lecture ever could. Gentle parenting isn't just soft words. It's a strong presence. It's showing up again and again with compassion over control, guidance over punishment, and love over fear. Because every moment you choose gentleness is a moment that builds a safer, stronger, more secure child. And when we raise children who feel safe, seen, and loved, we change the world. So let's do this with intention. Let's keep speaking with kindness. Let's lead with our behavior. And let's continue choosing the high road, even when it's hard. Because that's where real growth lives. I'm so grateful to be on this journey with you. This is the High Road Podcast, and I look forward to growing alongside you every step of the way. Thank you, and God bless you.